Believe it or not, new car prices are rising again. If you thought prices were already high, brace yourself. Back this January 2023, the average price of a new car in the States was around $46,400. That's an all-time January high and an increase of 4.2% year over year. Today, we're looking at what will happen to new prices this year and when we can expect new car prices to drop, if ever. I'll also give practical tips on how to slow down your car depreciation and retain as much car value as possible. New car prices have been rising in the last 2 years. By now, you've probably heard about the global supply chain issues that have been crippling the car industry. Well, we're still facing the semiconductor chip shortage. Put simply, low supply of these crucial chips and high demand in the car market has been the key factors that's keeping the price of new cars higher than normal. It's a ripple effect. This shortage has been forcing car makers to be super selective and prioritize which cars they build, since they don't have enough chips to build the full lineup. And 9 times out of 10, car makers have been choosing to output higher-end cars since that brings in more profit. Because of that, it's pretty much only high-income, good credit customers can easily afford a new car today. So what's the situation right now? Well, analysts predict semiconductor chip supply to improve this year. You might think it's good news, and yes, it is. But even if this forecast proves true, don't expect to see new car prices drop anytime soon. The reason is, you have to consider inflationary input costs. Let me explain. Some of the factors that are keeping new car prices high are due to higher cost of goods. You have raw material costs. They say raw material costs have been falling this last several months. In general, commodity costs are tracking lower than expected. We're seeing declining costs for synthetic rubber, cold-rolled steel, and stainless steel prices. But remember, there are also non-commodity costs that get passed on to car makers. I'm talking things like labor, diesel, shipping, logistics, electricity costs, and so forth. Production costs are higher in general. Now, some analysts believe that the average price of a new vehicle here in the U.S. may drop some 2.5% to 5% this year. That's because more inventory is becoming available, and supply constraints are easing since some car makers are producing lower-end models with lower-end features. But even if new car prices do take a dip, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll cause higher demands. We still have inflation, and it's unclear what the path will be. Also, interest rates are still on the rise. Federal Reserve interest rate hikes mean that new car loans are even more expensive. Just this January 2023, average interest rates for new car loans were 6.79% higher than a year ago. So the majority, I'm talking some 80% of Americans who finance or lease their vehicles, might not experience any relief, even if car prices dip 2.5% to 5%. Pretty much higher interest rates would offset any dip in car prices. If anything, the demand for new cars is a lot lower than it's been in previous years. Before the pandemic, Americans bought up to 17 million new cars a year on average. But last year, we only bought 13.7 million. This year, because of high sticker prices, consumer demand for new cars continues its downward spiral. And so, sales have been falling. In fact, one analyst described this trend as demand destruction. Interestingly enough, in just 2 weeks in February 2023, wholesale used car prices increased by 4%. Analysts didn't expect such a high jump in such a short period of time. But let's talk briefly about used car prices. Some analysts were saying that used car prices were starting to look better. After all, they've been steadily falling for the past few months. Back in January, used car prices were down 11.6% compared to the year before. That was the biggest 12-month decline since the Great Recession in early 2009. But don't get too excited yet. Several weeks ago, average used car prices were tracking at 30% above pre-pandemic levels. Remember the inflationary pressures I talked about in the new car market? Well, the same pressure impacts the used car market too. For example, used vehicles are also sensitive to changes in commodity prices because these prices affect their scrap value. Right now, there are fewer new vehicles on the road because of higher than normal sticker prices. Another reason is car makers are preferring to sell fewer high-priced cars than to rely on high-margin offerings like software features. But this is causing a domino effect into the future. Fewer new vehicles on the road mean that there will be fewer second-hand vehicles to trade in. In other words, this will ultimately perpetuate a low supply of the used cars. Not many people think about that. When you have low supply, you can't satisfy consumer demand. Well, that equals the skyrocketing prices. So it's a vicious cycle we're stuck in. And don't forget the busy selling season for used cars. Just around the corner. Car dealers always gear up for consumers who get their tax refunds and are ready to buy a car. They try to build up their inventories quickly this time of year, which also contributes to driving up prices. Here's yet another factor that analysts say will shoot up used car prices. Back in 2020, millions of Americans across the country lost their jobs, dealerships closed, and car demand fell lower than ever. In other words, in 2020, fewer people signed 3-year leases on new vehicles. Now we're in 2023, which is 3 years later. Normally, when leases or contracts end, the cars go to the used car market. Believe it or not, 3 to 4-year-old vehicles make up a huge chunk of used car sales. But since there were less leases that were signed 3 years ago, that's another reason why used car market has a smaller inventory right now. But let's shift gears and get back to the new car market. Not many people know this, but they say the new car market is becoming a luxury market. This is a big shift that could affect the market more ways than you think. The reason why the shift is remarkable is because of how fast it's happening. A couple years ago, if you told someone that the Jeep would have a sticker price of $110,995, they'd probably laugh in your face. But today, this is the new normal. Just look at the market shift over the past 5 years, for example. Way back in December 2017, there were 36 models with MSRPs below $25,000. This price sector of the market made up almost 13% of all new vehicles that year. Sales volume was nearly 204,000. And in 2017, buyers with subprime credit scores made up 13.9% of the market. But just 5 years later, in December 2022, there were only 10 models with MSRPs under $25,000. And this price sector of the market made up less than 4% of all new vehicle sales that year, and sales volume for that sector dropped to some 43,600. Plus, that same month, buyers with subprime credit scores only made up 5.2% of the market. Now, I know you'll say inflation changes the dollar value of money, and it's true. So you'll have to take that with a grain of salt since I haven't seen stats on the adjusted value. But here's something that'll give you a glimpse of what I'm talking about. When you look at higher-end car prices from December 2022, you'll find more than 25% of all new vehicles sold at MSRPs over $60,000. Plus, there were over 90 unique models in that category with total sales of about $323,400. 5 years earlier, in December 2017, only 8% of all new vehicles sold had MSRPs over $60,000. And there were just 61 models with sales of 122,900 cars. By the way, did you know that an entry model Tesla now costs than the average new car? After Tesla started slashing its prices a few months ago, the Tesla Model 3 got a brand new and improved starting price. And it's just under $43,000. And it's less if your income level makes you eligible for the $7,500 EV tax credit. Assuming you do qualify, you're looking at a starting price of just $35,500. We finally reached the day when a Tesla beat the price of its gas-powered competitors. Who knows which EV maker could be next? All this traces its roots back to the EV price war that Ford started by reducing the price of its electric Mustang. Then, Tesla bit. By 2030, analysts expect the EV market to reach a whopping $1.1 trillion globally. But this huge market has already had its fair share of bumps and bruises. You might remember that at one point last year, the Model 3's price climbed up to $62,000. Now more than ever, the U.S. continues to lessen its dependency on fossil fuels and gas-powered cars. This year, 2023, has been described as a pivotal year for the car industry. When you think about it, cars aren't investments. Cars are liabilities. A house is an investment. Houses appreciate or increase in value over time. On the other hand, a car depreciates or decreases in value over time. Let's talk more about depreciation since it relates to car pricing. Basically, depreciation is the difference between how much your car was worth when you bought it and what it's worth when you sell it. The longer you own a car, the more you use it, the more your car's value will go down. Let's say you bought a car for $20,000 and sold it for $12,000. That comes out to a 40% loss of value over the years you owned the car. Did you know that a brand new car loses somewhere between 9 and 11% of its value the very second you drive it off the lot? So if you bought yourself a brand new $30,000 car, the minute you take it home, you burn $3,000. After 1 year, you're looking at a total car value about 20% less than what you bought it for. Typically, a new car will depreciate anywhere from 15 to 25% every year till you've owned it for 5 years. After 5 years, your not-so-new car will have lost 60% of its initial value. So what causes a car to depreciate? Several factors. For example, there's mileage. The more miles you drive your car, the less it's worth. You also have fuel economy. The more miles you can get per gallon, the better. Obviously, there's also car reliability. A car with a strong reputation for being durable will hold its value better compared to a car with a reputation for always breaking down. I'm talking about brands like Toyota, for example. Some of the top vehicles with the lowest depreciation include the Toyota Tacoma, which depreciates just 29.5% in 5 years. That's among the lowest of all vehicles. The Toyota Tundra has an average 5-year depreciation of 37.1%. A Nissan Frontier has an average 5-year depreciation of 37.8%. And the Toyota 4Runner is at 38.1%. Of course, another factor is the car's condition. If your car gets damaged on the outside or the inside, it will affect how much people will be willing to pay for it when you try selling it. Another factor is shifting consumer preferences. A car that's popular with consumers today might not be as popular in a few months, let alone a few years. Cars that are very popular are known to depreciate less than those that are less loved, even if the brand's reputation for reliability isn't necessarily the strongest. Take the Jeep Wrangler or Wrangler Unlimited, for example. It has an average 5-year depreciation of 27.3%, which is surprisingly low. In general, pickup trucks and Jeeps depreciate the least within the first 5 years of ownership compared to luxury sedans and EVs, which lose the most value during the same time frame. To give you an idea of how an EV depreciates, take a look at the Nissan Leaf. It has one of the highest depreciation in the car industry. I'm talking an average 5-year depreciation of 71.7%. That's gotta hurt. The Chevy Volt is 71.2%. Then you got luxury cars like the BMW 7 Series, which has a high depreciation of 71.1%. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class sits at 69.9%. Honestly, I say just avoid cars with high depreciation. By the way, if you want to slow down your car's depreciation, well, unfortunately, there's no one definitive standard of car depreciation formula, but there are things you can do to help. First, when you buy a used car as opposed to a new one, you're letting the first owner take the initial depreciation hit. In other words, you benefit from the loss in value. Also, you can try to keep your car's mileage down. Obviously, people prefer used cars that have less mileage because it usually translates to less wear and tear and less maintenance costs. Also, be sure to stick to your regular maintenance schedule. Regular maintenance prevents key parts and components from wearing out prematurely. Also, try to drive carefully. Car accidents lead to car damage, which isn't good for your car's value. Last tip of the day, choose a car model that's more likely to keep its value, like Toyota, for example, and brands that retain value more than others. But now you tell me, are you planning on buying a new car this year? And when do you think prices will fall, if ever? Please share by commenting below. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for your support.